You know, I've been talking about earned media value for quite some time on this podcast, and my friends at Eisenberg have just raised the bar on earned media benchmarks with their social index. Social Index now gives you global earned media values across a growing list of 6 geographies for all your KPIs across the 7 top social platforms: Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube. You can now visualize these values for deeper analysis, and they have a look back window over 19 months for historical comparisons. Social Index is updated daily. Don't get stuck with old data. Over 1,000 companies have used the Social Index to understand the ROI of their social campaigns. And if you work with a social agency, you should demand that they incorporate earned media values into your reports. Get your earned media value for social content. Visit earnedmediavalues.com. Again, that's earnedmediavalues.com.
For all of us, it's about predicting where the consumer is going and getting half of it right.
One of the things we want to do is create ads that don't suck.
Embracing change creates great possibility.
I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today. Today on the show, I've got Grant Johnson. He's the CMO at Emburse. Emburse is a spend management company offering solutions that help organizations manage employee expenses, process invoices, and make payments. And on the show today, we talk about his journey to become CMO at Emburse and how he ended up there, as well as his 5 C's for a CMO's playbook. And those 5 C's are culture, coaching, campaigns, and category, as well as courage. And so we talked about each one of those, get his thoughts and advice for CMOs, and much more. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Grant Johnson. Grant, welcome to the show.
Alan, it's great to be here.
I'm excited to have you on, and I definitely want to start off with, I've heard you've been schooling kids on the tennis court lately, and I got to know what's going on. Like, what is this hustle that you have on the tennis courts, the competitive tennis courts for that matter?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I'm a USTA ranked, nationally ranked 4.0, and the great thing about tennis, you can be 7 or 70, and if you play at a level, you're going to play with somebody kind of in your range. And as I've been playing for a few decades lately on some of these weekend tournaments that I'm in, a 21-year-old will show up, somebody like my son's age, and they tend to be, hard hitting, but also somewhat overconfident. And so I was playing this youngster, let's say, a couple weekends ago, and I mean, he just crushed me in the first set, and he was kind of getting bored, so he's like looking at other matches while he's playing me, which is it's a bit insulting.
Right.
So I just started getting the ball back more often. Next thing you know, he lost the match, and he was like shocked. So I don't do that too often. Don't get me wrong, but it's fun every once in a while to, win when you're not expected to.
Well, I think you're my new hero, because I'm going to the gym. I'm in my mid 40s, and they're all the kids, man. They're so much more flexible than me. Like, I do CrossFit, so like more flexible. They don't need as much warm up time. Like halfway through the workout, I'm warmed up at that point. Now I'm ready to kick some tail, but like it takes me a while to get warmed up. I don't know about you.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I was told you should like get into a sweat 20 minutes before a match, which I drive there and I run around the court a couple times. But yeah, I love CrossFit, so good for you.
Let's talk about business. And what was your journey to become CMO at Emburse? Like, where did you get your start, and what was your first CMO gig? Because I know this is not your first rodeo.
I've done it a few times. I'd been a VP of marketing at a couple companies. I got a call for this company based in Boston, Cambridge, actually, called Pegasystems in 2009. And I'm not sure how I convinced my mom, my wife to move from California to Boston, but somehow, we both decided to do that with our younger kids at the time. And Pegasystems was a company that the CEO used to say it was an overnight sensation, 20 years in the making. But at the point I got there, it was about 200 million, and we were on a really good growth path. I stayed 3.5 years. We got to 500 million. They're $1 billion today. And so that was a great first CMO gig. And then I moved back to California. 4 winters was about all of Cambridge I could handle. So I became CMO of Kofax, and that was also an interesting journey because we were acquired three times, once by a public company, once by a foreign company, and once by private equity, Thoma Bravo. So I think I've been acquired probably seven times in my career, and I've been part of acquiring or merging with 17 companies. So when I got the call for Emburse, they said they had pulled together through a series of acquisitions, mergers, six companies, and they were looking to build a branded house under Emburse and not only bring it all together, but really propel growth to launch new products and services and ultimately go public. So that's literally been about 2 years now.
That's wild. I mean, and just you've done this 5 times as CMO. You've been through 7 acquisitions, I think, as you put it, but then been on the acquiring side or the merging side of 17 companies. That's a lot of companies. If I just try to think about that conceptually.
Yeah, no, it is. And, if you think about a career, it's probably not even one a year, but it's close to that. And some of these are tuck-in acquisitions and some are more transformational where you're really co-equal. And so those become even trickier because you have to make sure that the team you acquire, they've got meaningful roles. I've been through that particular equation a couple times as well.
This is going to be a little bit about sharing your wisdom that you've gained over the years. And when we were last talking, you mentioned you have these 5 C's for CMO's playbook. How'd you come up with these before we get into them, if you don't mind?
Like a lot of us living through this uncharted territory, brought upon the global pandemic. And I was thinking about, we've been so disrupted and we're trying to navigate our way through. What are the 5 C's? What are the constants, right? And so I started thinking about where, as leading change or leading the charge as a CMO, what those C's would be. And so, culture, coaching, campaigns, category, and courage became the 5 C's.
Did it just naturally come to you? I'm just curious if there was a spark that started you down this path.
Well, I think really the spark was I've always been involved in categories and campaigns as just part of the role of a, head of marketing. But I started thinking more about culture. I've shaped cultures at other companies, but I was in a unique position because I helped come up with our values. We call it the See It values. And that was a whole different exercise, but See It stands for sincerity, empathy, empowerment, individuality, and teamwork. And I'd actually come up with the 4 values with the similar team at Pega. And so this was my second time doing it. So I was actually a little more experienced and thoughtful about how to do it. And I realized that marketing's role when, you've probably heard of the summer of quit or the great resignation, through the disruption. And we have more responsibilities as CMOs to help with culture, help with engagement, help with retention. And so that's kind of when I started thinking about culture, then I got into coaching, and it sort of all came together over a period of a few weeks that I was thinking it through.
Let's tackle each of the 5 C's, if you don't mind. Again, they're culture, coaching, campaigns, category, and courage. And we'll start with culture. Tell me about culture.
To me, there's sort of a sub definition. So culture is both engagement and retention, more important than ever with the war for talent. And so when we had the See It campaign, when we launched it, we thought, well, gosh, you've seen these things fail where you put a poster on the wall and people kind of look at it, and then it's like part of the wall. I mean, it's just like it's background noise, right? Elevator music or something. And so we came up with ways through our internal recognition to recognize these behaviors. And I knew it was taking hold when a department says, here's how we see it. In other words, here's what we're doing to help deliver a great customer experience, right? So I could come up with a slogan all day long, but when it's embraced on a genuine level. So that was how sort of the culture, but I also had spent a decade as a marketer leading marketing teams with believing that you had to create a culture, not really an antithesis of the company, but to really build the kind of marketing performance, people call it performance marketing, revenue marketing. And so I had thought about what are the attributes that I want to recognize. And I've adapted those over time, but there are things around taking initiative and customer focus and collaborating, But over time, I added things like process improvement and digital savvy. I mean, we all have to, be more digital. And so really the culture is helping the company build its culture, but also creating a marketing culture where people can grow and thrive. And, I want to retain marketers as much as the company wants to retain talent across every function.
Next up is coaching. How does coaching fit in?
Coaching fits in because I feel one of the most important responsibilities as a leader is to both lead as well as to set the goals. Often our careers progress, we achieve things that we never thought possible. And sometimes they're stretch goals. I remember the first time I was a director, I was on a path, and I was the VP of marketing at the time said, I'm not sure if, you're ready for this. And I wasn't so sure myself, but the work will teach you, if you make mistakes and learn. And so coaching is finding, developing, and retaining talent and making sure that, you have these career path discussions at all levels, and you set stretch goals. My team all has stretch goals. It's not to say that the goals that we set are easy to achieve. By no means are they. But let's say you achieve a goal halfway through the quarter. What do? Coast the rest of the quarter? So that's partly why I thought that, coaching was important. And I make sure that my team institutes a regular coaching because I've got about 45 folks and, a number of direct reports, but there's a number of indirects. And I want to make sure they can also benefit from, their manager or their manager's manager supporting what they aspire to do. Because you often find that, people won't leave the company. They'll leave the manager that they didn't think was going to give them the opportunity.
How do you you just mentioned, 45 total team members. Obviously, they don't all report to you. You've got indirects or layers there. Do you approach coaching the coach different than coaching the employee?
Yeah, to some extent I do, but I also try to make sure I can have a connection with each individual. I think we all have our superpowers or, unique abilities. Every leader, every CMO has, things they're strong at. And I think, communications is one of the areas that I'm strong at, but also connecting with individuals, kind of finding what turns them on, what they're motivated by. So I do regular, informal chats, and anybody has an open door. Like right now, I'm probably 3/4 through talking to everybody on the team. And partly I do it just to make sure that I'm accessible, but partly so I can hear what's happening at the ground level. It's easy to sort of, if you will, set goals and dictate, outcomes. But if you're not facing the roadblocks to achieve those outcomes, you might not be able to provide as much help as possible. So, finding ways to connect on a personal level and be available, I think is important, whether you're coaching somebody directly or indirectly.
Let's talk about the third C of campaigns. Now, as a marketer, this one makes a lot of sense because it's a lot of what we do is build the campaigns. But how do you think about campaigns in this context?
As I was thinking about demand, before the internet, I had a CEO come to me, and we were a public company, and it looks like the numbers were not going to be what was anticipated. So it's like, I need you to cut $1 million from the budget. And we were doing print advertising back then. I know it sounds crazy, but I said, I can't. He said, what do you mean you can't? So, well, I signed a 1-year agreement. If I cut $1 million now, it's going to cost us $2 million because we'll have a short rate. He said, oh boy. So now they came to me. I hope that doesn't happen. Say, hey, cut 100,000. I probably could. I'd hate to do it, but a lot more flexibility. And sometimes brand and demand come together in unique ways. We came up with this campaign as I was trying to think about how to accelerate our brand in the marketplace. We just launched a couple of years ago. We're up against some very established competitors and brands. So I came up with this idea to verbify brand. So it just popped in my head. I was out for a walk one day, said, Emburse it. You Google something. Why don't we just Emburse it? And so we sort of launched the campaign internally, and we came up with a way to get everybody involved. We have 800 plus employees. And I said, look, just go to a local gym in your neighborhood around the world. We've got employees in all, cities and many countries. Just get a coffee, a lunch, a drink. And, with our app, you just snap a picture of the receipt and on your smart device and use the Emburse app, and it's, automatically in a reimbursement process. And so we came up with the tagline, don't just expense it, Emburse it. And what was great about it is people appreciated us as an employer, but we had so much followership. We got like 1 million views because, we're supporting local business. We're doing good by doing good, right? And now we're going to launch the next phase with customers. That'll be coming up pretty soon. But that's a way where you can combine building brand and, we got a lot of, website hits and, certain customers, I think only 5% of your targets ever in the market, but, they might be in the market next quarter or next year.
I love that notion of turn your company into a verb and burst it. And it does kind of roll off the tongue, actually, from what you described the company does and the app that you guys have and the process and how it makes it very simple for employees to Emburse it. Let's talk about the fourth C category. And I want to know how you define that and what do I need to be thinking about? Because I know we operate as marketers, we're operating in existing categories, but how do you think about it? What do you mean by category?
Yeah, I think about it a couple different ways. I think I was inculcated, schooled, if you will, in what is probably the best-selling technology marketing book of all time, Crossing the Chasm. Jeffrey Moore, he's written Inside the Tornadoes, Escape Velocity. I love that one as well. Lots of really thoughtful books. And it really talked about the technology adoption life cycle. And so if you think you're in a category, that's in some cases, that's just too broad. You really need to think about where your customers are in their life cycle. And things that work for the early adopters won't work for the mainstream or the laggards who, oh gosh, everybody's got a smartphone. I guess I should get rid of that flip phone thing, So that's one way category. But there's also been some recent thinking. I was listening to the CMO of this company called Solanas, and they take his name's Dave Peterson, and I hadn't heard of Solanas. By the way, they just raised $1 billion, so I thought I had to look into what the hell they're doing because that's crazy, right? And so he was a co-author among a few others this Play Bigger book, and it really comes up with a framework how to kind of pivot into a new category. And an example of what they did. Because we were in Pegasus as the first CMO gig, we were in something similar called process mining, and they came a new term. They called it execution management. I mean, that sounds a lot more interesting than process mining, right? So I think there was a lot more to it than that. But I think whatever category you're in, you can't necessarily on your own create the category. It's some have done it, but it's going to take a lot of dollars to do that. But you can certainly redefine it, and so that's what I mean about the category. And so that's positioning, but it's also within the position, you have to, have certain things that resonate. That's what I call the messaging aspect. And it requires a lot of focus to get it right. I mean, good enough isn't. So you have to come up with something clear, compelling, and consistently expressed. And I found that it takes a lot of times a few tries at it before it feels right. And whether it's a tagline or a campaign phrase, or your overall value proposition, you have to just keep working on it, testing it with audiences. I always feel like what you want to do as marketers is make it easier for your customers and prospects to understand what you do and decide if it's right for them. At that point, it's sort of in their hands. But if you're stuck in a sea of sameness and they don't understand not only what you do, but why you're unique, you're probably destined to either fail or, fall short of your goals.
Distinctiveness is even more important in some respects in B2B categories because you need to stand out, right? We're all trying to solve the problem of the category in our various unique ways, but standing out is a hard job, frankly, but should drive market share if you stand out in the best way.
Absolutely.
Let's talk about the fifth C, courage. It seems to be self-explanatory to some degree. Like you've laid out all the things that come before and now you just need to have the courage to act. But how do you think about courage? How would you elaborate on courage?
I think you've nailed it. And honestly, I had originally thought about 4 C's and I realized, gosh, you could have all that, but if you don't have the courage of conviction, and that's kind of what I mean, you have to have the will, the skill, but also the fortitude to take the risks and, stand behind your ideas. Because look, if you're in finance and, somebody says, well, I wish we made $1 million more or we had higher profits, you can't change the numbers, but everybody has an opinion about marketing, right? And so somebody's going to criticize your idea or say it's not going to work. And came with the Emburse campaign, I was testing it. And generally, I had really good support. And then, I went in front of the board, and, boards, especially for, CMOs that don't interact as much as like a CEO or a CFO with the board, they can be intimidating. And one of the members said, well, gosh, why do you want to do that? Because, you'll become generic and anybody can use Emburse it. And then fortunately, my CEO said, well, yeah, that'll be a great problem to have. If everybody knows Emburse, then we won't really need to worry about somebody copying our Emburse slogan. So, but it was helpful to have that support. And I think it can become a force multiplier if you stand behind that campaign. But you're going to face headwinds. You're going to face criticism. People will try to undermine you. That's why I think courage is really is equally as important as the other 4 C's.
I agree. I think it's a good addition for sure. You've had 5 tours, I believe, as CMO. We talked about the number of acquisitions that you've been through, and then the number of acquiring or merging of companies that you've done. What advice would you have for a first-time CMO?
I would say, get lots of allies. I could probably write a whole chapter on that. But how about I'll just share like 5 things.
Yeah, sure.
Maybe one for each stop along the way. But the first is get to know the CEO on a personal level. I didn't realize it's my first CEO, and anybody can look this up. But as a founder, multi-billionaire, the CEO of Pega's, he can be pretty intimidating, but he's a great guy. And I found out that he, likes to have bagels in Brookline, which is in part of Greater Boston, on Saturday. And I didn't take advantage of it. I really should have said, hey, can I join you sometime and, find out better what makes them tick? Because, you're going to go through everybody goes through their honeymoon. I was there 3.5 years, the company after that 4.5 years. I don't know what the average tenure of a CMO is. Maybe it's 3 years. And so maybe I outlasted the average a couple times, but, I might have decided to stay longer. But I just think that's important. I've gotten to know our current CEO, Eric Friedrichsen, really well. We've skied together. We've, tried new wines together and, find out what each other's kids are doing. And I thought, hey, doing the job was enough. So I get to know the CEO. I think that beyond just the business side of it. So that's one. The other is, and this I learned by observing one of my mentors getting thrown under the bus by the CRO. So you've got to align with sales. I mean, it's not a question of who's right, who's wrong, who succeeds and who falls short. I've always felt you got to lock arms and agree together, go in together to the CEO or the board and the rest of the executive team and say, here's what we decided to do. And, if marketing's contribution to pipeline is a little short this quarter and sales is a little short next quarter, it doesn't really matter. We're all short, right? So I think that's key. And the other thing is the importance of getting buy-in and really the aspect of communications to figure out, like, you can be in a group setting and people don't want to disagree, or maybe the CEO likes the idea and they don't want to disagree with the CEO, not you, but they really disagree with your initiative, your idea. So you've got to do, follow up, maybe prior to a meeting, certainly after a meeting, to say, do you really have the support you need? Are you aligned? Will the investment be supported over time? The fourth is setting expectations, and whether that's setting expectations with the CEO, the executive team, the board. I remember one CEO telling me that I was getting some criticism, and he was very pragmatic about it. He said, "Look, you're Spider-Man, but now they want Superman. They want a different superhero. It's like, you're not going to walk on water, but just make sure they understand what you can do and what you can't do. Say it in a tactful way." So I think the next, and then certainly last but not least, I think early in a lot of our careers, we just wanted to excel at everything, right? And if you're good, it's like, okay, I can do it all, but nobody can do it all. And so I learned at one point we were growing really fast, and I didn't hire enough talent fast enough. So really, you've got to quickly assess that first 100 days. What do I have? Unless you're a pure startup, you're coming into some situation. What do I need to achieve these objectives I've set? And do I have the horses? Do I have the people? Do I need to upgrade or just fill gaps? Like, I didn't have a lead in digital marketing, right? And so, got to make sure that our web presence is compelling. So those would be the 5 areas that I would advise first-time CMOs on.
Love it. This has been a wealth of knowledge. I would love to switch gears a little bit and ask you a series of questions that I ask everyone that comes on the show, just get your perspective, get a little deeper understanding of you, what makes you tick, and all that good stuff. One of my favorite questions to ask, frankly, is has there been an experience of your past that defines or makes up who you are today?
Yeah, I would say that getting fired for the first time was, yeah, God, boy, that's a wake up call, right? It's like, oh, and so what did I do? What did I not do? What could I have done differently? Was it just not a marriage made in heaven? And I was at an early stage company. I won't name them, but the CEO, he wanted me to work on Sundays, and I just like, I'll work hard, but I just like, I'm not going to give up my tennis on Sundays. And so we just were not aligned on, what it would take. And was I that person? And it had been good to know that before I took that opportunity, because I turned down something else that, probably would have been a little bit more stable. But I think it's important that you have to have the agreed upon metrics of success, not only but what does good look like? Because you say, well, look, I achieved the goals, but you don't want to be debating if you in fact succeeded when you actually get there.
Right. And you talked about tenure a little while ago, but I mean, it's inevitable that a CMO eventually will get fired. Like it will just happen in your natural career progression. And thank you for talking about it, because it's natural. Unfortunately, it's natural, and there is a lot of learning to take place when it does happen. What advice would you give your younger self?
Well, that's an easy one. I would take more risk, right? I mean, some of these questions there's a couple ways you can answer them, but I think my early years, I was risk averse. I wanted to do the job well and, get set up for, promotion if I performed over time. And I wasn't necessarily aiming to make an impact as much as once I became a CMO. And now it's like if somebody calls me and, I'm very happy where I am, but like even before this, and somebody would call and say, hey, and I said, what's the mission? I actually had co-authored a book on branding quite a while ago. And I got called by Intel, the person who had come up with Intel Inside. He was retiring. They said, we'd like you to interview for the role of stewarding the Intel brand, which like, hey, that was pretty impressive. I got the call. So I said, what's the mission? Well, it's don't screw it up. It's like, well, I can't be motivated by that kind of a mission, right? So I think really it's important to understand that what you're aiming to do and have a roadmap how to get there. I read a book years ago. I've known this person for 20 years. It's called the CMO Manifesto. John Ellett. It's on Amazon, and it's like, I think it's like a guidebook for marketing change. First 100-day game plan for marketing change agents, and it gives you a really good outline to get how to make an impact. And so I just think don't go it alone. That's my advice.
I love it. Is there a topic you think marketers need to be learning more about right now, or you're trying to learn more about yourself?
I feel like, so I love about marketing is I'm always learning, and there's always something new, especially in the digital age, to learn about insights and intent and AI. There's a lot of things, but I tell you, in spite of all the technology in the MarTech stack, what I think is overlooked is that with all this technology, we're still not getting as close as we can to our customers, right? And you just have to have a pulse, like what's on their minds, what are the critically unmet business problems maybe your company can address, what are the gaps they have in their execution that maybe you can help close, and how can you make them heroes? I mean, everybody wants customer testimonies, case studies. Well, you got to make the customer a hero first. They'll give you a testimony of the product. It doesn't suck. It's probably not a really good endorsement, right? But it's so. I mean, there's also qualitative vehicles like advisory boards or surveys. I just think having a constant pulse on your customers is really important.
Are there any brands or companies or causes that you follow or you think other people should take notice of?
Well, I tend to follow a lot of the major, larger brands because they just have the weight to impact the market. So, for years I followed Adobe and Microsoft and, Google and Amazon. I think, for a long time they didn't even advertise, but I think they've come up with a pretty good, struck a pretty good chord with, some of their current communications. But I also like, looking at some of the fast, scaling companies. I mentioned the Solanas. They've got, not only do they raise $1 billion, they've got 100,000 followers. Like, that's not easy to do for a B2B company, right? That's a lot of people that are not just signing up and then forgetting it. And then listening recently to some other talks by, Asana, Airtable. I mean, certain companies like Zoom, okay, great. You could understand why they took off with the pandemic, but other companies, their success wasn't as obvious through the pandemic. They must have figured out a way to navigate it, connect with customers, and scale. So those are the kind of brands I like to keep interest in and follow.
Last question for you. What do you feel like is the either largest opportunity or threat that is facing marketers today?
I think the biggest threat is, especially if you're an established company, is somebody's after your customers and they're going to take them if you don't serve them well. And one of the things, I've been in SaaS for a long period of time, is that we're seeing the freemium models encroach further into paid subscription. So if somebody offers just enough for the freemium and they can find a way to provide additional value to upgrade to the paid or a more premium subscription, and they've got a more frictionless customer experience than you might have or another competitor has, then you're at risk. So that's another reason you stay close to customers. You also need to find ways to adapt your own offering. The market, the only constant is change. And so your ability to adapt to it is key to ongoing success.
Hi, it's Alan again. Marketing Today was created and produced by me, with support from my team and podcast editors, sound engineers, and writers at Share Your Genius. Find them at shareyourgenius.com. If you're new to Marketing Today, please feel free to write us a review on iTunes or your favorite listening platform. Don't forget to subscribe on marketingtodaypodcast.com and tell your friends and colleagues about the show. I love to hear from listeners. You can contact me on marketingtodaypodcast.com. There, you will also find complete show notes, links to what was discussed in the episode today, and you can search our archives. I'm Alan Hart, and this is Marketing Today.